I'm Mike Vandermause. He's Pete Dougherty. We're here to talk about the NFL draft. Pete, we hear all the time Packers general manager Ted Thompson is going to take the best available player, but we all know they're going to take a defensive player in the first round of the draft, right?
Can't imagine that they wouldn't. He sticks to the best player available, probably better or more than most GMs. They all pay at lift service, but even you look at even Thompson's drafts, and of course he drafts for needs. Otherwise, you could end up taking 7 guards. So it'd be a real shocker if the first pick is not a defensive player, and it'd be a pretty big surprise if it's not a defensive end or an outside linebacker.
All right, so let's get into those positions. Who would you say the Packers might take if you narrow it down?
Of course, all this is contingent on who goes, and there's some leeway there. You're never quite sure how it's going to fall. Best guess is it'll be from a group of 5 or 6 linebackers and defensive ends, and the most likely candidates I would say are Shea McClellan from Boise State, an outside linebacker. Courtney Upshaw, if for some reason he gets down to 28, the outside linebacker from Alabama. Nick Perry, defensive end, outside linebacker. He'd be an outside linebacker in the Packers scheme from USC. And you can't probably dismiss Devin Still. He's a defensive tackle for Penn State. He'd play in the Packers 3-4 scheme. He'd play end in the base defense. And then his deal is he's a talented inside rusher, so they'd move him inside of the nickel. They play nickel 2/3 of the snaps anyway, so he'd be spending a lot of time at defensive tackle when they go nickel.
Now, with the news that the Packers are going to release Nick Collins, is there any chance they would go after a safety in the first round?
Well, they're going to have to draft one, and probably pretty high, because they're going to want a guy who's got at least a chance to start as a rookie. It just doesn't look like there'd be anybody in the first round worth taking. Mark Barron is pretty much the consensus best safety in this draft, and it looks like he's going to go somewhere from 14 to the low 20s. It just doesn't seem like he's going to make it to 28. Otherwise, he's a guy that they would have to consider there. And the next best safety might be Harrison Smith of Notre Dame. It sounds like he's a second rounder from the guys I talked to. So I think it's pretty unlikely that they would take one in the first round, but from the second round on back, that's a position to look at.
Well, you've heard it here from our draft guru.